So today we're going to learn how to simplify expressions that have the number I. So first of all, remember our number friend I is equal to the square root of -1. Hi, no we don't, sorry. Our number friend I is equal to the square root of -1. And I squared is equal to -1. Because think about if you squared this thing, it would undo the square root and you'd just be left with what was underneath it, which is a -1. So these are the two that I need you to know for today and kind of have in the front of your brain. And truly, the more important one that we're going to use a bunch is the second one. So anytime you see an I squared, we're going to replace it with a -1, because which looks less confusing? I squared or -1? -1. So we're going to replace any I squareds that we see today with -1s. All right, so we're going to add and subtract and multiply just like we've been doing. You're going to treat I like a variable. Actually, let me write that over here too. So we're going to treat I like a variable. Except when you have I squared, in which case, remember, we're replacing it with -1. So you're going to treat I just like any variable unless you come across an I squared, and then you're going to replace it with a -1. So we're going to treat it just like any letter we'd come across, like an X or a Y or any other variable we'd come across. Okay, so we're going to start by adding like terms. So I'm going to move back over here. So do we see how this is a plain old number? We've got a 4 sitting there. And then here we've got a -6. Do we agree those are like terms that we could combine?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, what is 4 minus 6? And if you -2, there we go. So we've got -2, and then I've got -7i plus 2i's. So if somebody said you have -7i to start with, and then they gave me 2i back, I'd be at -5i. Now would be a great time if you don't have a calculator. There are a couple left back there, or I've got one up here if you want to grab one.
Can you run through that again?
Yeah, I sure can. So when let me make it even a little bit larger as well. Okay, so what I did is I combined my plain old numbers. So I had 4 minus 6. 4 minus 6 is -2. And then I combined my things that had i's.
Oh, we're just doing combining like terms.
Yeah, we're combining like terms. That's all we're doing. Yep. Okay, so look at part B. Let's start with our plain old numbers. I've got a 1 and a 2. If I add 1 and 2 together, I get 3. And now, look what's interesting about the i's. I have a -3i and a +3i. Well, so what happens to those? They cancel, right? Yeah. And so this one's just going to give me 3. All right, last one of this type where we're just adding and subtracting like terms. 6 take away 3. What does that leave me with? 3. And then we've got, I agree with Michael, we've got 18i. Now, here's one thing a lot of math textbooks do, and I'm not going to mark you wrong, but a lot of math textbooks really like it when you have the real part first and the imaginary part second. If you had them flipped, if you had the 18i first, I'm okay with that, but just know that, like, typically when we write it, we like the thing without the I first. We like the real part first. Okay, how'd that feel, okay? Yeah, we're good?
Yeah.
Okay, let's come down here, and we're going to multiply. And this is where we're going to see some I squareds that we're going to replace with -1s. All right, so let's start multiplying. This one's just a distribute. So we're going to send the 4 through. So what's 4 times 5? 20. What's 4 times 7i? 28i. And that's my final answer. I can't combine the 20 and the 28i because they're not like terms. One has an I, one doesn't. The next one's where we start to get a little trickier. Okay, 3i times 2. What do we get there? 6i. 3, let's just start with the numbers, with the coefficients. 3 times negative 4 is what?
Negative 12.
Negative 12. Now, I times I is going to give you I squared. Okay. Am I allowed to leave an I squared?
No.
No. Okay, I'm going to tell you 2 different ways you can think about this, and you pick which way kind of resonates better in your brain. We talked about the fact that I squared is negative 1. So you can go ahead and you can replace the I squared with negative 1.
So, would it be plus?
Yeah,
12?
so it's going to be, what's negative 12 times negative 1? And Demaya said it, it's going to be positive 12, yeah? So that's one way to think about it. The other thing that I tell people, so this is another way to think about it, is that the I squared's job is to change the sign. And once it's done its job, it can disappear. So if it changes the sign, it would change it to a plus, and then it can disappear. So you can think about it either way. So whichever of those ways that I said it makes the most sense to you, that's how your brain should process it. Again, you can think about its job, it changes the sign, and then it disappears. Or you can plug in the actual negative 1 and multiply it to get your answer. It's up to you. Okay? Let's look at the next one. The next one we have to FOIL. Yeah?
Which one's easier? Which way's easier?
It's up to you. What way made more sense to you is basic, yeah. So whatever way makes more sense is the way you should do it. It doesn't matter. Yep. Oftentimes in math, like what I will always try to do for you guys is give you a couple different ways to do the same thing. And it doesn't mean one is better than the other. It's just kind of like what resonates, what makes sense to you. Yeah, which is the best for you. Make sure phones are away. All right, this one we got to FOIL. 3 times 4. 12. 3 times negative I.
Negative 3i.
Yeah, nice. You guys are getting fast at the multiplication. 6i times 4.
24i.
24i. Okay. 6i times negative I.
Wait, hold on. Where are you? Negative 6i. Or
Negative 6i
squared.
squared. Okay. Now, we've got 2 things we need to deal with here. Do you see how these are like terms here that I can combine in the middle? Let's start there. What is 24 take away 3? 21. So I have 21i when I combine my like terms. So this is how I kind of like to think about it. The I squared's job is to change the sign, and then it's done. It did what it was supposed to do.
It can go home.
It can go home and take a nap. It's done. So I'm going to change the sign so that it's a positive 6. What do you notice that like, now I've got a situation. Now I've got something more that I need to do. Do I have more like terms? Okay, so do you see how once the I squared goes away, we have another set of like terms that we didn't have a minute ago? So let's add those. What do we know 12 plus 16 is? Yeah, 18. So we have 18 plus 21i. And again, we like to write the real part first and the imaginary part second. Am I going to mark you wrong if they're flipped? No. I just want to make sure you know that's a thing. Like mathematicians like to have it written like that. Okay? It's kind of like one of those unsaid rules. All right, let's do one more of those because that's definitely the trickiest of all the types of problems. All right, here we go. 5 times 3.
15.
15. 5 times negative I. Negative 5i. 2i times 3. 6i. 2i times negative I.
Or no, positive 2i.
A positive times a negative is a negative.
Right.
We've got just a 2, right? Because it's like 2 times 1. I times I is I squared.
Oh, I don't know what I just thought
I
but
I think you were trying to do multiple steps at once, is my guess, and you were
Yeah.
trying to like switch the sign with the I
Yeah.
squared,
Yeah.
is my guess.
I agree.
Let's combine our like terms in the middle. If I have 6i and then negative 5i, what do I really have? 1i. And then remember, the I squared's job is to change the sign. And once it changes the sign, it can go home and take a nap. Because that's what I would do. Maybe have a
Wait,
snack first.
So is it like an invisible one?
An invisible one in front of the I,
Yeah.
yes. Could you write the one? Yeah,
Yes.
you could. It's not hurting anybody. It's not wrong. It's not any of that. It can, yes, you can have a 1 in front of the I. Do you have to have it? No. All right, let's do our last step. Do you see how switching this over gave me like terms? What do I get when I add my 15 and my 2?
17.
17. So 17, and we can write it 17 plus 1i. Or you can just write 17 plus I. It's up to you. How do we feel? Good? We can do all that?
We're gonna do the